Hey everyone, it's Ken Puls with you, and I'm back again here to show you one of the interesting questions that actually came out in one of my recent Ask Ken Anything sessions from my self-service Business Intelligence Academy. And what I loved about this question is it actually assumed that things were going to be really hard. And yet sometimes I get to answer questions where I say, you know what, it's actually not as hard as you think. And this was kind of a neat one that I thought I'd share with you because it's not super long, but it's kind of interesting when we look at our data, what we get and the effects that it has on the outcome. So let's take a look at the file here. The first thing I'll call out is that I've got this table over here. This is acting as a raw data source. So in the student's original example, this was an external file that was being loaded into Excel via Power Query. So I've got my Power Query over here for my line of credit transactions. And you can see it's not making any change to the data. It's just loading the data into the worksheet, which is then being fed to a pivot table. Now, the problem with this one is that what the person was looking to do was they were looking to get a count of the lines of credit that had actually been issued, as well as a count of the lines of credit that have actually been used. And we can see here that we've got two that actually have balances, but we've got one that's sitting at 0. And yet when we feed it into the pivot table, we get a count 3 being used. This needs to be 2. So the question was, okay, Ken, I've got this loaded into a pivot table and I'm getting a count of 3. Do I have to actually take this to Power Pivot so I can get DAX to write a crazy DAX formula in order to get this to work? And the answer is, well, actually, no. So what I did, and what I always like to do in these kind of scenarios, is mocked up a quick example. And by default, mine just worked. And they were like, wait, what happened? So let's take a look at what I did slightly differently than what they did in order to get this to actually calculate correctly. So I'm going to go and I'm going to edit the line of credit transactions query, because in here right now, what we're doing is we're bringing in the raw data, and it comes in with our salespeople. We've got our line of credit limit. We've got our line of credit balance, but this one here is showing as 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to wipe this out. Let's go right click, replace values. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace this 0 with a, let's get rid of those. Replace that 0 with a null. And when we get our null keyword in here, the really cool thing about this now is that when I go close and load, null gets turned into a blank, and blanks do not get counted in the pivot table. So there you go. No magic crazy DAX formula needed or anything like that for this kind of solution. It's just simply saying, look, instead of putting in a value of 0, let's put in no value. And at that point, there's nothing to count, so it actually can't count it at all. Brilliantly easy solution. But the nice big lesson that we got from this one on this in our side of our course was, you know what? Sometimes we're so conditioned to use complicated tools that there's actually an easier way. When we sit back and we go, step back a little bit and look at things, we find out that, oh, this doesn't actually need complicated stuff at all. We can just use some of the base functionality of a standard pivot table and don't even need to go that extra mile. So there you go. Quick, fun tip for you that hopefully you'll actually find useful. See you next time.